Hey everybody, my name is Chip Dodd with Team Disability, and this is the race ramble for the recent World Championships of 2022 in Paraguay. We've got Luis Becdach here with us. We have Amanda Rand and the famous Jason Magness from Bend Racing, who is going to facilitate this session and keep us on track. We've got so much to talk about. We want to consolidate just the highs and the lows. So Jason, take it away.
First off, I'm only famous because I'm old, because I've been doing this for a long time. So, you know, I had a lot of fun living vicariously through you and other teams that I know that were over there. And correct me if I'm wrong, but this was your guys' first World Championship, right?
Yep.
Okay, that's pretty exciting.
No, not for me.
Not for you. When did you race Ecuador, or what did you race before, Luis?
You trained me for Ecuador.
Yeah, okay. Okay, I remember that. But as thisABILITY, this was your guys' first World Championship race, right? Okay. So, you know, like I'll kind of, you know, we saw you guys start off strong and then pretty much disappear, whether that was a tracker problem. Like there were some tracker issues. We don't need to go into that. But, you know, from our side, from the audience side, it was pretty exciting because you were one of those teams that there were a lot of people rooting for, and there was a lot of time spent wondering what was going on with your guys' race. So, you know, I've been filled in on a little bit with it. But, you know, what I really want to hear is kind of each of you, like that first trek, like this race had one of the biggest treks in you know, expedition history. It wasn't quite as long as the Spain World Championships, but it was undoubtedly harder. You know, from what I heard from my wife, who's over there, it was either up or down. You know, going into this, were you guys intimidated? Were you guys like, what were your thoughts as a team? Like everybody must have been thinking, how the F are we going to get through this first trek before we can even get to the main part of the race, right? So what were your thoughts on that as a team?
Well, I'll go first because I think I was the only one who voiced that I was pretty nervous about such a long leg. And yeah, I was just surprised how confident the rest of the team was. I'm like, okay, we're going to go with it. But just the cutoff seemed reasonable too. So that kind of quelled my nerves a little bit. And I thought Paraguay was a little flatter than it actually was. So that actually kind of made me less nervous. But yeah, like you said, going into it, there's either up or down. There's no switchbacks. It was muddy, loose dirt. Yeah, so that's what I thought. I don't know. Do you guys have anything to add about our thoughts on the trek before it even started?
I guess I'll jump in real quick just because nobody else jumped in. But like it wasn't only long. I think because most of our audience is probably United States. So I think it was like 76 miles with the equivalent elevation of a 20-story building every mile up and down for 76 miles. Like, it was absurd. So we knew that we were going to be marching up and down hill. And then of course it rained like on the second day. So now it's muddy, it's cold, it's slippery, it's dangerous. I think me going into it, I knew that if we can make it through this trek without destroying ourselves, we're probably going to be good the rest of the race. So we did take a little bit of extra time to just make sure we were as okay as possible.
Yeah. So was that the longest trek? Just like Amanda and Luis, had you guys ever done a trek in an adventure race that was that long? Really, had anybody done a trek that long?
Yeah, I mean, I was at Expedition Alaska, and that was a monster amount of trekking. And so in my mind, I was kind of like mentally prepared for like heavier packs, just being on your feet for a really long time. And I thought that it would be more similar to that with like a lot of up and a lot of down. I actually expected more like bushwhacking, kind of like that was, and like true wayfinding was my expectation going in. So yeah, mentally, that's kind of what I was prepared for, and thinking back to like, okay, this is what the body feels like once you start getting that many miles underfoot, and what that could be like. But kind of like Andrea mentioned, one thing, I'd been to Paraguay before and worked down there previously, but hadn't spent a lot of time like out in the terrain out there. And I was surprised after the race to learn that there's actually like a lot of silica in the soil out there. So it's not only just like sand and clay and getting slippery, but that like really loose, like slick rock and slick dirt that everybody was like tripping and sliding in. Apparently it's because there's a lot of silica in the mountains out there. So that was kind of interesting to learn, of like, it wasn't imagined entirely that it was so slippery.
Right.
But yeah, that was an interesting fun fact that we learned afterwards.
Okay, so what, like, going into that, like, what were your goals? So like, you've got the race maps, you've done all the, you know, all the organization, which has got to be a weight off your chest for most adventure racers. Like when you actually start the race, there's that moment of like, finally, like all the prep, all the planning, all the wondering, like it's action time, right? So like, what was your strategy going in? Was it to kind of play a conservative? Was, you know, because obviously a lot of the top teams pushed really hard right off the bat. And it looks like, looking at your spreadsheet, you had a goal of, you know, not being up there at the top, but setting a pretty strong pace and, you know, getting done in 2 days. Is that kind of how you started out, or did that get derailed pretty quick? Or tell me a little bit about that, the, you know, first couple of days of that trek.
Yeah, I'll jump in on that. The overall goal of the race, and we probably should have started with that, which we're still in the beginning. We knew we're not like a podium team. We know that. It's team thisABILITY. We're like, I don't know, Andrea and I are like 50-ish, approaching 50. We want to get out there and be ambassadors for the sport, show that the average person, not the average, but, you know, the average adventure racer can take it to the next level, participate in these events, and really enjoy it and survive it. And it's a life-changing experience. So, you know, I would say we're front mid pack. Like, we want to be competitive. Like, if we get anywhere close to the top 20 in the world championships, wouldn't that be awesome? But mostly it's like, let's not kill each other. Let's not get any permanent injuries. Let's hustle and go as fast as we can, but let's stay friends and remember to stop and smile and take photos and smell the flowers and enjoy Paraguay. It's like ecotourism is kind of the way I think about it. So we push as hard as we can, as long as everybody's willing to push. And then the minute somebody's got a problem, which obviously in this race we had a few problems, then we back it down, because it's not worth putting somebody through significant, which Lewis would probably say he went through significant pain. Right. But the idea is that the goal was, let's finish as a full team. We did not want to drop anybody for any reason and continue. We wanted all 4 of us to walk across that finish line together. So I'm super proud of us that we did that.
Right. So when did it, like, so when did your pace, you know, like, well, we know something happened to Lewis. So what happened, Lewis? Tell us, like, when did this trek become less fun for you and more, you know, perseverance and suffering?
No, I think, first, I think we had a very good plan going in. You know, we started with a common sense of purpose, right? Like, we're going to finish this race, whatever it takes, right? And, so I felt very comfortable with the plan. I wasn't expecting my feet to go like terribly wrong like they did so early into the race. So I started getting blisters, super heavy blisters. What was it, like on the first night of the trek, like going down, you know, the highest point in Paraguay, which was very low. But so my feet started getting really, really bad. Then we got wet, and it just kept getting worse. To the point that, you know, I really slowed the team down. We got to one of the checkpoints, which was checkpoint 19, and, you know, one of the medics saw me, and he's like, dude, I can't let you go. Like, your foot is actually infected. So I had a very bad infection in one of my toes. But I'm like, guys, I'm gonna keep going. Like, I don't give a crap. I'll take whatever it takes. We're gonna keep going. You know, you just gotta be patient, and that's where I really appreciate the team dynamic that we had, where it was about, hey, we're gonna do everything it takes to get to the finish line, right? So yeah, I mean, it was probably the first night of the trek. Then it started like raining like crazy, and it got even worse. So it really slowed us down, and it just kept getting worse.
So, like, how is your walking right now?
It's actually not there yet. I went up for a walk with Andrea right now, and I thought I was okay, and then the blisters opened up again.
Yeah. Okay. So yeah, you're still in recovery. Yeah. You know, that just, one of the cool things to hear is, you know, from my experience, I love adventure race medics, but unless the adventure race medics are also adventure racers or expedition adventure racers, they tend to like look at the things that you were doing to your body or we do to our bodies and be like, oh, you should stop. And I can't, you know, the number of times if I would have stopped when a medic looks at my feet or something, it was like, this is infected, it's dangerous. You're like, yeah, but I'll deal with it in 5 days. Like, is it going to kill me the next 5 days? Okay, then.
And I think, you know, that those type of things and just pushing through comes with experience, right? Yeah. So fortunately for me, this is my 3rd world championship. You know, I've done like all the freaking white asinchis in the world, and I've gone through those type of things. Not as intense as this one though. Like my feet were really, really bad. But at some point I told the team, I'm like, guys, look, I'll finish this thing. This is going to be about pain management. I'm not going to get cured. Like it's pain management, and I'll do whatever it takes. And to your point, typically the people at these TAs, they're not even doctors, they're volunteers. So they'll give you like an Advil or something like that. And fortunately enough, we after we finished the trek and the kayaking section, we found this pharmacy, and I'm like, the pharmacist knows more than these guys.
Yeah.
And I nuked myself. Like, I took everything that I could to manage the pain.
Yeah. Okay. So when you were in pain, night one, or, in this, because I've heard how intense the trek was, and how, correct me if I'm wrong, like what I heard from some other races, the first trek was like probably physically harder than any of the other treks. The navigation wasn't too difficult, but it was just like a really punishing physical trek that really kind of set the tone. And did you guys find it that way? I
think, there was a good mix between physical and mental aspect of it, because I had just come from White Asinchi a month ago, and it was jungle, and the jungle gets very monotonous.
Yeah.
Right. So you're like seeing the same thing over and over again. You're just going up and down. So aside from the physical part, I think the mental aspect of it was really tough as well, especially for the teams that were in the middle or the back, right? Because we were there.
Yeah.
67
in the rain and okay. So most important question coming off your feet thing, who got to carry Lewis's weight?
I think we spread it out.
Yeah.
We spread it out. It was
give somebody the chance to be the hero. I imagine, so in my head, I imagine Chip with like 2 packs on for as soon as I heard that there was bad feet. That in my imagination, Chip, I imagined you carrying these 2 giant packs, kind of like, Nathan does, or somebody on that team, like 2 big hyperlights marching through the jungle. But
I think we spread it out because like Amanda carries like 40 pounds rucksack with a weapon for a living.
Fair.
So she was able to take weight. Andrea and I have been running around with rocks in our backpack. Like we trained really hard for this.
Yeah.
So the minute Lewis needed a little bit of help, it was like, no, this is day 1. We got 7 days. It was like, if we destroy Lewis, we have destroyed the goal of this team. Mm-hmm. Everything was about, if we need to stop, we stop. I knew he was pushing through shit that he should have said, I quit, drop me off the TA, you guys keep going, I'm done. So it was like, what do we need to do, Lewis? It's your choice. What do we need to do to support you? He was in charge, and we took his weight. We did whatever we could, and we worked together as a team, which is what adventure racing is all about.
Yeah. I don't know. I wanna like call out Andrea. She was kind of like the hero, just like carrying all kinds of weight, both on the bike and on the track. Andrea was out there like the unexpected pack mule of the team. It was awesome.
Yes. I was not my usual role, but I have to say it's really hard to see someone in so much pain. And I think, I'm not even sure if the rest of you know this, but I told Lewis, if you have to quit, I understand. Because I looked at his feet, I'm like, oh my God, that's like beyond what I think a lot of people could handle. So I was like, if you need to, we all respect you, and of course he didn't take that fight, but yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Intermission, he would never quit. You know that, Jason.
Yeah.
He would have to pretty much lose a leg.
Yeah.
Like my mom was thinking he was coming back in a wheelchair, and he was fine with it. So
yeah, that's okay. So Lewis, I want to hear from you, if you can give us a little hint, because anybody that pretends that pain management is not part of adventure racing has not really adventure raced at the expedition level. So what, once you got to that pharmacy, or when you were at your low point, what was your like cocktail of, that would give you a little bit of relief, right?
You really want to know?
All of the above.
As long as it's not water banned. I don't want to get like what was it? Just ibuprofen? Was it a mix, or was it?
No, so we had some ibuprofen in the kit and everything, and that wasn't working. Then, fortunately, we were in Latin America, where you can have access to a lot of things without prescriptions.
Yeah.
So I told the team, like, look, guys, I'm gonna find a place and I'm gonna nuke myself.
Yeah.
My stomach might hurt, but I'll just push through. So, I started with diclofenac. It's like amoxicillin or something.
Yeah.
That started working a little bit, but so I had a really big opening in the bottom of my foot that just the pain was really bad. So then we find another pharmacy, and they have this thing in Paraguay that's called Dolorban, which is like amoxicillin plus this plus that, like to numb the pain, right?
Right.
And the daily dosage is 2 a day, and I took 6. And then the lady's like, "Hey, you have an infection too, so you need an antibiotic."
Yeah.
Gave me the antibiotic. So you know, my feet were pounding from the infection, and I actually started to get a fever, and I didn't tell that to the team because I didn't want to worry them. So I was feeling a little feverish. My eyes were getting red and everything. So the lady said, "Hey, you're getting a fever. This is an infection." So I took the antibiotics. I took the nukes, which you put under your tongue and they dissolve.
Oh, okay.
So my tongue was super numb too.
Yeah.
So, but hey, I mean, it worked. You know, fortunately after that, you know, we got a really long bike leg. So my to Chip's point, which I really appreciate, it was all about taking care of my feet. So, you know, I was really careful not to get them wet and things like that. So after that, my feet got a little bit dry, and I was just, you know, the whole race I was managing the pain and the infection.
Yeah, and I'm assuming you did this. You know, my public service announcement to all those adventure races out there is like, if you are managing pain like Lewis was, and like we all have, just make sure your teammates are completely up. They're making sure you're hydrated, because, you know, we've seen that go bad. As a race director, I've seen people take too much of that and not be drinking enough, not be managed enough, and kind of go into that dangerous place. But we are like, if you've got good teammates and you trust them and you're all working together to manage that, like, you know, at some point your choices are drop out, or like you would, you know, that's why this is called expedition racing, right? Like there's plenty of stories from the world of expeditions where you don't have an out, and you know, to your guys' credit, the only way to really finish some of these big races is to put it in that context. Like, even though, you know, there's safety and you could call and get medical assistance, but as soon as you do that, you're out. So like to really think about it, like you guys are on an expedition trying to survive, and what does it take? That's what gets a team like you guys through.
I think, as you know, Jason, one thing that really stuck with me that you guys taught me years ago is, you know, we started with that common sense of purpose. And we're going to finish this thing. And, you know, unless there's something that's massively going wrong, we're not going to drop out. And that's been my philosophy ever since I learned that years ago. So I was like, guys, we're going to have to slow down. But we're getting through. We're getting through. Don't worry about me. Just let's keep going.
So let me jump in on that real quick.
Absolutely.
Just because the people that don't race internationally don't understand the rules are different. You, like a typical race in the United States, you can skip checkpoints and move yourself forward. So if you have a person that's suffering from feet on a trek, you can say, hey, let's just skip a few checkpoints. Let's get to the TA, get fixed, get on the bike. 15 hours later, you're fine. In the international races, sometimes it's the second you skip a point, your score stops. You are now ranked at that level. And so we were still hopeful that his feet were gonna eventually be okay, and the bike would fix them, because we'd be on the bike for 15 hours. So we were reluctant, and I don't think we did. We never skipped a checkpoint by choice this entire race. We let the race director say, from here on out, you have to skip the EXP points, the expert points. But we went for every single CP that they would allow us to get until the final trek. At that point, we said, we're just walking to the finish. And that was another goal of ours. We were balancing do we give up and start skipping points and let the score stop, or do we keep going full course and let the race director pull us back?
Yeah.
And if I could just say, you know, it goes back to like, are we competitive or not? Like, well, yeah, we're pretty mid-pack, so we're not as competitive as some, but we still wanted to do the best we could at any given time. So our goals continually changed. And even towards midway or the end, we'd cross paths with the Argentinians several times. And it was a little bit of a joke that we just want to beat the Argentinians. And we ended up doing that. But, you know, did it really matter? Not really. We're like one place different. But it gave us the motivation and the drive to really do our best.
And that's, I mean, I think you guys did a remarkable job of like continually redefining what your success was. Like, you know, you always have to go into this race like, this is how we're measuring success, and then stuff happens. And a really good team is one that continually redefines what that is, because you have to have a goal Otherwise the suffering becomes too much. Like you have to be actively engaged in some sort of pushing, some sort of drive, some sort of like mental work to be present and racing, right? Otherwise, like it just turns into something that is like literally too miserable to keep going. And it was really cool to see, you guys do that. And honestly, a bunch of us at home, like for those of you that were tracking, like they finished the trek and there was a lot of celebration. And then we saw you guys take some time and get on the kayak and finish the kayak, which like you looked like you guys moved pretty good on that kayak. Did you sleep in the middle of the kayak?
Yep.
Yeah.
Not all. We had a bonfire and a dance party.
Okay, great.
So Amanda's amazing fire starting capability in the rain. Yeah.
I mean, was it like rubbing sticks together, or did you have a lighter?
Listen, it's some special pyro techniques. No, I'm just kidding. Yeah, actually, it was kind of hard to find like anything dry, and I think we ended up starting it with like candy wrappers.
Yeah.
Like shoving little twigs inside the candy wrappers until we could get more stuff, and then burning a bunch of the bamboo.
And so you had a fire for a while, and did you get some sleep halfway through the paddle? Or not really?
Yeah, like half an hour of sleep or something like that.
It
was really cold.
Yeah.
We just needed to make it to sunrise. So the minute the sun starts coming up, and I know Amanda was like tending the fire, so most of us slept for a little bit, but the minute the sun came up, we started our dance party and got back in the boat.
And got warm, and then that looked good at the end. But then like your guys's, you probably know this, like your tracker left you at that TA for like literally almost the rest of the race. And so this was the fun part for, like we were occasionally like, we'd see a video, we'd hear that you guys were still alive and still moving, which was exciting. But like, I remember there was chatter online where like, why, what are they dropping out? Like they've been sitting in that TA for a day, right? But it was, did you leave your tracker, or did the tracking just fail? Okay. Because there was some people left trackers in this race, right? I mean, so.
Yeah, Avaya, come on now.
Okay, so you had your tracker, and then at that point is when there was another catastrophe on so you had it looked like you had a pretty good paddle leg, like that you moved, your pace was really good, you got a little sleep, but then what happened on the bike? It was that bike, right? That something kind of crazy happened, right?
Reese, do you want to talk about this one?
Sure. Yeah, because everything happened to me this time. So
yeah.
No, so basically, we were doing fine. And actually for that kayak, like we transitioned decently. We didn't take that long. We actually got out pretty quickly. So we started biking, and then got a few checkpoints, and then we were like in the middle of nowhere. And I started pedaling, and the bike just wouldn't pedal anymore. It was like what the hell? And fortunately, Chip is kind of a Mr. Mechanic there.
Yeah.
He's like, we're screwed. It's the pawls.
Yeah, the pawls had stepped out. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm like, what the hell is? I didn't even know what the hell a pawl is. Like, we're not gonna fix this. So that's where I think.
Hold on, let's stop you just so people listening. What he's talking about is the pawls. It's PAWLS. It's the little things in the ratchet in the hub that keep it so when you're pedaling, it goes forward and then can freewheel backwards. So you have these three little spring engaged things, and somehow Lewis stripped them out. So basically, he had a rear wheel that was not connected to his pedals anymore, or his chain. It would spin downhill, but you could spin your pedals and your rear wheel wouldn't drive you forward.
Yeah. And this was in the middle of a hilly type of single track terrain.
Yeah.
But this is what I really appreciate about this team, and I really loved about this team, is that, man, we became problem solvers. After going through the entire foot stuff and Chip and Andrea kind of flipping on the kayak, like it just became a continuous problem solving thing, which is really cool. Chip's like, look, it's screwed. Let's do something. So I'm like, hey, I can tow on your bike, and he's like, I can run with your bike, because fortunately he runs with he bikes with running shoes.
Yeah.
So he's like, I'll run the uphills, and then you can tow me on the flats and whatever. All right, let's go. So it took us 10 minutes, and we're like, okay, we keep going. And even like that, we got the checkpoints. We got all the bike checkpoints, with Chip running and me pulling and everything. So, but it did take us longer than expected. Obviously, we were aiming at 8 to 9 hours, I think, and it took us like 16 or something like that.
Yeah.
So yeah, I mean, we kept moving. We got to the TA, and to be honest, we actually made that cutoff but they moved that cutoff. So
Okay.
they pulled it back. That was a noon cutoff. And they put it back to like 9 during the race. They pulled it back to like 9 or 10 a.m. So we
Okay.
did make the cutoff because people were just taking just too long on that trek.
Right, on the next trek. So basically you did that bike with a scooter bike or whatever you want to call it, like a non-pedalable bike, kind of like my kids' bikes, right? So like I'm basically like a strider, right? That they coast on the downhills. Yeah.
We had a dog leash tow cable that you know, with the I kind of designed it. It's got like a bungee cord on the end, so but it was connected to Lewis's pack, which is not, you know, of course if you fall it rips him off the bike. It's dangerous. Don't do this at home. But the tow cable, we carried that with us, knowing that if any failure occurred, again, this wasn't our first rodeo. Everybody on the team was super experienced. So we knew something might happen. We got to be prepared. So between the tow cable and the skateboarding, the bike, Flintstoning it, yeah, we got to the TA.
And then did you get because there was a number of bike legs after that, did you get a new rear wheel, or how did that?
No, fortunately the guy, so I have a Trek and the guy was from Trek when we got there. And fortunately the pieces were still there. So he just took it apart and put it back together. And then we were out again.
Cool. Okay. And
yeah, we were so lucky.
When you missed that, so you finished that first bike, and then did you skip that next trek and they just sent you back out on the bike? Is that what happened?
Yeah, they sent us out on the bike again.
Okay. And then so just to kind of get the overview, and then you did the next bike, and then did you skip that second trek, or did you do that one?
Yep, we skipped the second trek too.
Yeah,
that was the food truck.
So you basically skipped the two kind of middle treks. You did the first big trek, and then you did a long paddle, and then basically you did a really long bike, scooter bike into bike, right? And then you did a final trek, right?
Yes.
We were allowed.
What?
We were allowed to do the final trek, but in doing the math, it was like, and we kept hearing that other teams were having a really hard time. Like it seems like all the treks were harder than they were expecting. So we would hear these rumors like, oh, so-and-so got lost for 9 hours and teams are taking really long. And so I think that's one reason why they were making teams kind of move forward, knowing that there's no way you're going to go out there in an hour and a half and get 3 or 4 points. So even the last trek, we mathematically looked at it and we're like, look, we've already kind of blown this race. We're just having a good time. Is it really worth risking not crossing the finish line to get 1 checkpoint? Because mathematically we could have gotten 1 checkpoint, but it would have put us within 30 minutes of the finish if nothing went wrong.
But we still still walked into the finish. It just we didn't get any points on that. So
you still trekked from that. You trekked from the final bike TA to the finish line, correct?
Correct. Yeah, along the road. We just didn't go after any CPs.
Yeah.
I think we kind of suspected at that point, because at different parts of the race, we had looked at the points as laid out by Utsi on the map. And by that point, we had kind of learned a trick that like every point that we were like, oh, that seems like, you know, this should be fairly quick and fairly easy to move between these 2 points, that like inherently it will not be easy. Like something is there to stand in your way. Some obstacle must be overcome that like maybe isn't immediately apparent on the map. So as we were looking at like necessarily the distances between the checkpoints, it looked like it might be falling into a trap of like a grand orienteering course at the end to kind of run the team through, which it turned out it was. And so at that point, I think we had like an hour and a half or maybe like just under 2 hours at that point. And as we were going through and just looking at the distances, like Chip and Andrea were saying, like it looked like it should be clearable, but at this point we were like, we're on to you, Urtzi. Like we're not falling in this trap. Like can't come all this way and survive this whole course and then, you know, miss the cutoff at the end and blow it. So
and so with what the cutoff was 172 hours, 170 hours, right?
Yeah, we made it
right. It was a 7-day race, at noon to noon, so 168 a week.
Okay, so 168 hours, and then you guys finished in 167, so you cut it pretty close.
Yeah.
We got our money's worth.
If anything went wrong on that last trek, we would have not made it. And again, you know, Lewis at this point, Lewis is still not running. He's moving. He's not so much in pain, but it's not like we can jog it into the finish because we're running late.
Right. Well, I bet, you know, if it was come down to it, I bet you could get Lewis to run for like the last 20 minutes if that was all I had to do. But yeah, it wasn't a short like that. How long did that last trek take you guys?
About an hour?
Hour and a half on cobblestone.
On cobblestones.
That was good. Not flat.
So yeah, that must have been exciting to like finish that bike at like, you know, 166 hours and be like, all right, we gotta like do RTA and cross the finish line.
You know, but one of the things that we were talking about, Jay, is that you know, you have your front pack teams, right? Those are guys that are all, you know, like you guys. You're there to make podium, and there's competition among those 10, 15 teams, especially at Worlds, right?
Yeah.
There's also competition in the mid pack.
Oh,
right?
100%.
So like, you know, I think at some point when we started feeling, and one thing that I really liked is that, you know, we hit our lows typically, you know, 2, 3 in the morning, whatever. And then the sun came up and we were like, all right, making jokes and energized and everything. And that's why I keep joking about the Argentinians, because man, when I saw that we were like competing in the mid pack, I'm like, guys, we are not letting these guys beat us. Like, so, you know, I got Chip on the toe, then I got Amanda on the toe, and Amanda, you know, kudos to her, man. She's a trooper. I mean, man, that bike, she fell a whole bunch of times. She was hurting. She never had been towed before. And in this particular race, you know, there were some technical rows. She braved up to it. She let me tow her. And I'm like, hold on, we're catching up to these guys. We're going to pass them. So, you know, I think I that's the part that I truly enjoy about this thing is, you know, you still can be competitive, even because everyone else is suffering too, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, and you know, like I said earlier, and you guys have alluded to, like, you have to stay competitive, right? And that's redefining what competitive means. Like, it can start off saying, hey, we're aiming for top 20, and then it's like we're in this pack of 6 teams and we want to, you know, beat them, or we want to make the cutoff, or like, you have to keep being competitive. And that's the only way you can kind of have that common sense of purpose and push through and keep making time when you have to. And so just a bit back to Amanda. So I've heard like mountain biking is not your strongest suit. Is that correct?
Oh yeah. Yeah, that's definitely true.
Okay. And how did you, like, talking to Chelsea, she said this, I mean, you know, Chelsea's kind of the mountain biking is Chelsea's strongest suit. Like, if she could just mountain bike and she said the mountain biking was pretty incredible in this race, like not single track, but like some technical stuff, some descents, some big climbs, some rooty stuff, some muddy stuff. She said it was pretty engaging, and she's a very accomplished mountain biker. How did you find the mountain biking in this race?
It was engaging for sure. Yeah, I was definitely challenged. And honestly, at first started out a little bit maybe like timid on the bike, if that makes sense, which only makes it worse, right? Like, if you're timid on the bike, then like it's never good. But honestly, like, Luis, you helped me so much on this race, and then Andrea, like, you're just so encouraging. And honestly, like, I didn't think it was possible to grow a skill set in the middle of a race, but actually between like the two of you, my biking improved so much, and especially some of the like big downhills at night, like going through some of those really big drops, like with all the baby heads in the mud and everything at night. Like, there's a 0% chance I would have gone down. I would have just walked the bike down most of that stuff in previous races. But yeah, I mean, by the end of like the second night on the bike, and it all kind of blends together. But there were a few moments too where we would hit the bottom of a hill and start cruising back up, and I would be like, did you guys see me just ride down that? Like, who knew I had that in me? So I mean, that was really cool for me. Like, we kept hitting new technical things that I just didn't think I could do or had the skill to do. It was really neat, like, with the encouragement of the team. And some of it, I mean, like, I definitely like crashed my bike like 170 times or something, and like luckily there was like a lot of sand, so, you know, it was a nice soft fall most of the time. But also, I mean, to see like Luis and everybody like pushing so hard as they're like going through pain, it also encourages you, like, okay, you gotta like dig down deep, like watch where his bike goes, watch how he moves, or like watch how Andrea moves, and then just do that and just stay behind them.
Except for that time that it backfired.
Yeah,
so a lot of the time I was kind of, you know, Chip would get too far ahead. So, you know, I ended up being in the front kind of to keep us all together. And I was kind of trying to pick a line that, you know, would be good. And it was night and we're going down this downhill that, you know, it's hard packed until all of a sudden it's sand and it's deep sand. And I just crashed right in front of Amanda. And I was kind of able to, you know, fold the bike over and run out of it, you know, but she didn't have time for that. So she slammed down right behind me, but onto the ground. I'm like, oh, it's just, yeah. That
and I felt really bad in that too, because, you know, as you're like, oh my God, I'm about to crash into my teammate. I've only had like a couple mountain bike crashes, but one stands out at a race in Belize actually. And I had a teammate who we were going down a big downhill and ended up stopping his front tire, went over the handlebars kind of thing. And we were all really close behind him in a pace line, and like a couple teammates hit him. And you never, like, for me anyway, like I can't ever forget like how horrible it feels to like, not only like your teammate just had this epic fall, but then you just hurt your teammate. And so like, as I'm seeing Andrea like crash and fall over, I'm like, no, like slamming into her. And yeah, that was
like a worst nightmare. It's like
emotionally, I think it was worse than physically.
It was really like Lewis is like a super good mountain biker. And so as Amanda was like, on the uphill is the one I remember the most. Like there's these crazy uphills and we're like, there's no way we're going to make it. And Lewis was like talking her through it, like, just breathe, just focus, just keep pedaling, you're going to be okay. And so she was making it up shit that's really hard to make it up. And I remember her like just literally like crying, like, I just did that. So having somebody that I guess I'm getting at is like, for people who are watching, that's like, how do you get through these big 7-day races? Is if one teammate has a skill to help encourage and coach the other teammate, and Lewis really stepped up on that side. And I you know, it's kind of funny, like I'm like the team captain officially, but I tend to like end up being the Sherpa and the navigator and all that, you end up trying to do too much. And so I knew it as like, my job is not to make nav errors and to carry as much weight as possible. And so Lewis and Andrea, to a sense, picked up that team captain, that encouragement, that here's Amanda, here's how we got to do this, or towing and all of that. I wanted to focus on the maps and just take as much weight as I could. So it was really neat to see the team dynamics switch to say who needs what at what time. And I think that's the way we got across the finish line, was being flexible and being adaptive.
And accepting help. It's really hard to accept help. Like I am no stranger to that. And so even that's showing your bravery, you know, when you're accepting help is a sign of bravery, in my opinion.
So, you know, one of the things I just kind of want to put in the back of your guys' heads that I've thought about for a long time, and you may not have, is like, we talk about how much our teammates help us, which is clear that you guys have a really good team dynamic, right? But one of the things that I find fascinating about these expedition races is by having good teammates that allow us to stay in the race long enough to be so exhausted that we get out of our own way. Does that make sense? Because we all have preconceived ideas of what our limits are, of who we are as athletes, as mountain bikers, as thingers. And if we spend so much time in these environments and our teammates help us stay there, what happens is, like Amanda found out, like we get out of our own way. We're so tired that we can't hold on to these like negative self-identities of what we can do. Like in mountain biking in the middle of the night, all of a sudden you're in this bubble and you're just clearing stuff because you don't care anymore. Like you can't care anymore. You're too tired. Your team has helped you get there. And then you have these moments of like, basically like these Zen, you know, experiences where you're just this raw person that's able to take on new information. Like, and in a day-to-day life, we don't get to do that. And so, you know, you guys keep coming back to these races because, you know, whether you know it or not, every time you get there, and I know you guys think about this, like there's something that changes in you when you go into these races, and like you become a better person, you become a better athlete, you become a better partner, because not even because you're trying to, just because you're in these environments that they like force you to. You either drop out or you become better. Like those are kind of the two things that happen, right? And you guys have finished enough races that you get these patterns in your head that like push you to keep going, to get to that point where you become better, where you let go of things that are no longer serving you. And it's really cool to see how you went in this race and overcame so many things, and, you know, obviously came out, you know, really appreciative of each other, hopefully also appreciative of what you all individually brought, right? Because it's really easy to talk about teammates, right? And that's kind of how our culture is built up. Like, oh, this person did this, this person did this. But, hopefully like, knowing you guys and knowing Lewis for a long time, it's like, you guys did tremendous work out there, and you guys should all own that yourselves too, like what you brought to the team. Does that make sense? And how, because that does take 4 people. Any one person on an adventure racing team can kill the whole thing, which is the craziest part of the sport, right? Doesn't matter how much planning, any one person can become the excuse for the whole team, can become the excuse for themselves, can become, and you guys didn't do that, even though you had plenty of opportunities to do that, right? Which is cool, which is why I think that I always get excited when you guys are doing races and when you guys are doing these talks and when you guys are helping other people realize, I think it's a super powerful thing, because I think you guys are like living legends and living ambassadors for what this sport is, right? And how it kind of makes humanity better. So it's just really cool to see and hear some of these stories, right? So I really appreciate that.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah, I mean, that's high praise, and just, you said it so well, so thank you.
Okay, but now I want to know about injuries. Who else had injuries? Lewis feet, anything else like that was like a hard moment for each of you, like physically or emotionally? Like what were the, Lewis, we know had some serious lows and dealt with them fine, but like Andrea, what was a low point for you?
I didn't have many physical lows. I had some mental lows where I was just kind of disappointed with how we were doing.
Yeah.
So I overcame that. I'm not a great swimmer, so there was a swim.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there was a swim that, I would say if that was the most challenging part, was probably that for me.
Okay.
So, yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
When she says like the swim, we're talking about, it's been raining, the river's like 8 feet deep, it's moving at 4 miles an hour, it's full of crap. We called it the Caca River because it's like doo-doo brown.
I heard
this was intimidating. This is not your normal, like, oh, I'm scared of swimming.
Right. Yeah. I heard that the rivers were not the cleanest and most inviting.
When you
That's
pass
what we
by
call
a
it,
dead
the
cow
Caca River.
in the river, it's polluted and stinky. Like, this is gross.
Yeah. What about you, Chip? What, like, did you have some like physically or emotionally? Like, what was your hardest?
Not physically. Again, I had trained really hard for this, and a lot of that worked out. A lot of the experience worked out. Mentally, I think it was the hard part of coming into a race with such an experienced team and all of that, and then hitting problems like the bike braking, and there's like nothing Lewis could have done. These were all things that were like out of the blue. He just got done doing Wadasenshi and had no problems with his feet, and then now he's got problems with feet. Like, it was like everybody did everything right and things didn't go our way. So I think that was like mentally for me, it was like, it was hard to shift from being like, we're at our first world championships, we're trying to like be front mid pack competitive, and then to have to deal with the bike braking. But as Lewis mentioned, and everybody, it was like again, it's not our first rodeo, so switching gears to say, okay, at this point getting to the finish is the goal. We don't want anybody to drop out versus we're trying to be top 20. So I guess for me that was the hardest part. It was just these setbacks that just kept coming. And I think everybody felt that. It was like, we know we could have done so much better if these things just hadn't have not gone our way, that were out of our control. Yeah.
Amanda, anything for you other than your 170 bike crashes?
Yeah, I mean, after that, there were like a couple falls that left like pretty banged up feelings, and mostly ego, but also, yeah, pretty physically banged up by the end of it. At one point I took like a rock to the head. Like, that was, I mean, not great. And I just remember sitting there for a minute, like that one actually kind of racked me pretty well. I remember like Andrea checking my eyes, and it's funny because I completely forgot about that until Andrea brought it up today, and I was like, oh yeah, I forgot about.
And that was on the trek.
Yeah, in the mud, and it was really funny. It was like right before we got our ropes gear too, and then right before we went into the canyons. I just remember like for the second time, and Andrea was like, well, I'll feel really dumb if I fall on these slippery, rainy rocks and I don't have a helmet on, but I'm carrying my helmet, and like put the helmet on, and then a second later like fell again and smacked into a rock, and I was like, oof, I'm glad I have my helmet this time. But yeah, I think just some of the bang ups on the bike made it like pretty painful to ride, and shockingly, the cobblestones were like so painful to ride on and walk on. That was a pleasant surprise. The maps, you're like, oh, we're gonna be on a road. This is gonna be great. And then you get on the cobblestones and they're just punishing, like worse than riding on the trail at that point. So
yeah, the cobblestones in South America are some of my least favorite.
yeah.
Yeah. It's why
I think she's playing down that slip where she hit her head. I just saw she slipped and I didn't see it, but she was just sitting there and I could tell it was like taking her a minute to assess what just happened. And she wasn't moving. And I was like, this is kind of serious. We've got to like really pay attention to this. And anyway, she got up and was just fine. But I remember thinking, wow, you know, you don't think it all the time because you're moving along all the time, but you don't realize the dangers that could happen because you don't let your mind go there really. And so then when you do have a close call, you kind of have this rush of, oh man, we've gotten by all of these other, you know, steep rocky descents without injury, but now I have something new to be afraid of, you know, like it just, it rushes at you. So I had that rush then like, oh yeah, I forgot we're doing something a little bit dangerous. So I was really glad she was okay. And anyway.
And for everybody, I think like the terrain, like I said, there was no, or like she said, there was no switchbacks. Like we're going on this really, really steep terrain and it's a lot of scree. So it's that thing where you slip and then you land on your back.
Oh,
and like she hit her head and we're all like super like, holy crap, that was bad. But I think
on a pointy rock.
Do what?
Yeah.
On
a rock. Like literally minutes after Andrew said, I think we need to put on helmets. This is getting dangerous. And we kind of hemmed and hawed. And I was like, I don't need a helmet. And then everybody else put on theirs and I put on mine. And then she falls and hits her head and like rung her bell. But then even, I think it was Amanda, maybe it was the next day you said something like, hey, Chip, just put it on your radar. It's still causing me a little bit of problem. And they're like, whoa, like it seemed like another, a little bit harder and it would have been a concussion. And now all of a sudden we are out of the race because it's dangerous to move on.
But just one more thing. One thing that made me feel a lot better was like, oh, I've had several concussions before. Yeah. It doesn't feel the same. So I'm like, oh, I forgot, you know, you've been through some pretty harrowing situations outside of racing. So that, like, oh yeah, I forgot. No big deal.
I mean, isn't that like, you know, I was an EMT and I think that's what they told us, like ask the person that got a concussion if they think they got a concussion and trust them. I'm joking. That's not like medical knowledge. So that's not what we really do. But you know, it just kind of cute. Like,
you feel better.
Do you feel like you got a concussion? No, I feel like I'm fine. I just smashed my head. So a couple more things before I kind of am done. So, you know, we talked about some of your struggles. So tell me, you know, why don't you just tell me about a time that because there's always these moments in a race where a team is firing on all cylinders, like, and you know, those moments are kind of what we strive. You know, obviously the top teams have more of those moments, or they figured out how to sustain those moments, right? But like, what was one of the times you guys can remember where you guys, like all four, you were like, man, we are moving good right now. We're powerful. Like things are you know, cohesive right now.
Maybe after
I want to let other people talk because I talk too much. So, Lewis, you go.
I think there were a couple of times that I felt that way. One was at the beginning of the race. You know, we started good. You know, that initial trek. And then, you know, when we're like, okay, there are the Argentinians. We got to step it up, man. So I feel like, you know, that's when we were, and I think every single morning, like I felt like we hit this low at night, then, you know, then in the morning, I just felt the dynamic started getting better and we were, you know, getting back into our groove. So there were a couple of times, I believe.
Yeah. Anybody else have a moment where they were like, yeah, this is
well, I'll say a moment that I don't know, maybe I was the only one that thought it was kind of heroic, but there was a boulder scramble that we had to take our bikes up. And I remember thinking, well, you know, it'll be best and quickest and, you know, the coolest thing if I just do this myself. And we all had that mentality. So we're, you know, even though Amanda and I are, you know, a little bit smaller, you know, we're there, you know, carrying our bikes up this boulder scramble. like, this is kind of hardcore. And we just all marched right up and did it. And I thought that was kind of cool.
The other teams were like throwing their bikes and bitching about it. We're like, I was actually singing with Amanda. Going up, yeah.
Yeah, that's what were you singing? Do you remember?
Yes, I was singing Take Me Home, take me home to
John Denver.
John Denver.
Country Roads.
Yeah, and a couple of teams cut up to us there, and everyone's like, "Oh, this is a piece of crap!" I'm just throwing their butts, and we're like, in our group, going up.
I mean, I think it's a good thing that there's sleep deprivation in expedition racing, because when you're done, like, your brain has this way of like forgetting the moments that you're the most miserable. They're still kind of there in the back of your mind, but they're painted in a different light, right? And that's a pretty cool thing. Okay, so what, I don't really honestly care too much about your whole nutrition plan, but like, what was your favorite? There had to be, and now the way we think about food in expedition racing is we have fuel and then we have emotional food, right? And we're very specific about our fuel, and it doesn't matter what it tastes like. That's, why we invented our own kind of fuel source. But like, emotional food is so important out there, right? Emotions are so important out there. So each of you, like, what was something that you put in your mouth that like literally changed your perspective? You may not, like, you've got to have those moments where like, oh my God, that's the best thing I've ever eaten. Now I'm happy. I was miserable 2 seconds ago, but now I'm happy. So does anybody have an emotional food moment that is worth talking about?
I remember it was after the trek session and we were getting ready to go out on the kayaks, and we came into the TA, and I wish I knew the volunteer's name, but like, Luis has his feet up and like the medics are working on him, and we're like thrashed after this thing, right? And we have to walk like all the way across the sports center to set all our stuff down, and all the food's at like the other end of the gymnasium, basically. And like, I get my shoes off and I'm like, I gotta walk all the way over there. And this like amazing volunteer, he's like, don't worry, I'm bringing it to you. And I was like, oh, thank God. And then he brings it to me. And then we decided like, well, we want to dump like a ton of salt on this thing. And they had told us like, oh, there's also salt and other stuff up there. And so I start to like shuffle across to go get it. And this wonderful man was like, I'll bring you salt. And he literally kind of like trots across the gym and brings an entire tiny bowl of salt to us to dump all over the pasta. And like, it's a tiny thing like that, but it was like just such this like emotional like moment for me of like, who is this angel man bringing me a bowl of salt so I don't have to walk across the gym? I mean, I'm gonna put my shoes on and keep walking for like 5 more days, but for some reason in my mind I was like, this man, what a wonderful kind thing that he's done. It was like the best salt I've ever put on a meal in my life. I don't know.
That's awesome. That's a great story. Anybody else?
Yeah, my emotional food is I just love cereal. So I took cereal and powdered milk and put some water in the baggie and eat it out of the baggie, and it just feels really good.
Yeah.
I'd say the thing I was carrying with me that I was usually excited about were Skittles. Like I pack them in little tiny baggies, and Skittles just like, oh, they last a while. They taste good. They do get gooey and messy if it gets wet, but whatever, they tasted amazing. But I think the most memorable of this whole race was, I don't know, it was like, I can't remember the actual TA, but it was probably the TA 5 and 6, where they had a food truck, and Luis was able to speak Spanish, which was he and Amanda like saved the day because they could speak Spanish and we had no idea. So I was like, I want 3 burgers with an egg, because they fry eggs and they put them on the burgers in Paraguay.
Yeah.
And French fries and cheese, and it was greasy, and it was just a ton of food, and it was hot, and I couldn't get it into my face fast enough.
Yeah,
it was the best feeling ever.
Okay, so what's like, obviously, like when you finish a race, it's always, I'm sure you guys have a reflective process and that kind of stuff, because you guys, this isn't your first expedition race, nor is it your last, but by any means, so what's kind of, was this the first time the 4 of you have raced together, right? Yeah. And it sounds like you guys overcame a lot and like still liked each other at the finish line. So that's a huge, especially when we have a hard race. It's easy to like each other when we like get on the podium or finish the full course or like meet our goals. And then even if we didn't like each other, we tend to like high five at the end and kind of But you guys had some big tribulations and trials that you overcame. So what's next for each of you or the team thisABILITY? What are your kind of your goals going into, you've got your first Worlds under your belt, Lewis is third, right? But for you guys, your first Worlds, like what's the future hold for your goals and your plans?
I can start out with Andrea and I. This team hasn't talked about it too much because we just got back. But right now,
before you go, like it was also really cool. I just did nationals, which was like my consolation prize for not getting out of World, and it was really cool. Like I get there and I see thisABILITY on the roster of nationals. I'm like, wait a second, like the thisABILITY, like how is that working? Did they switch? And then I met the other guys and I was talking to them. I was like, it's cool that like we're the only two US teams that are big enough and like, well, I don't know, put together enough that we both had a team in nationals and we had two teams in Worlds, but like you guys were able to field a team at the World Championships and a team at nationals at the same time, so kudos to you. That was pretty cool. Like you guys are doing something right. Like you're growing, you're inspiring people, like you have a team around you. So, okay, back to you, Chip.
And again, this is not just for us to process and mentally repair, but it's for the folks that would like to do an expedition. So basically the way I look at it, like a team is a group of people that are like-minded and like Lewis said, have like a common purpose.
Yep.
You put us into a short race, we're going for the podium. We're balls to the wall and just trying to crush it. In these
depending on who's there.
International races. But international races are like, we know better. Like this is a race of attrition. Let's survive this. Let's be mid-pack. Like especially, I mean, and this, like the Europeans just whoop Americans most of the time. And so basically the idea is like, because we've done a lot of clinics now for 101 adventure racing. We've raced with some of the folks from the clinics. So we're a team that's not like just 6 people. We have like 15 or 20 people that we've raced with and pulled from. We raced with Lewis side by side. He had his own team in Wadasinchi, and we raced side by side for a while because he talked us into doing the race, and somehow we ended up side by side. And it's like, hey, we get along, let's race together. Amanda, we raced side by side with her in Belize, which she was on Kami Bar. And so I guess the international adventure racing community is so small, everybody starts getting to know each other. So, for example, Rachel Nolan, who you probably know from the Ireland team and Eco Challenge, we met in Belize as well, and we did Expedition Africa with her. So I look at it like we have this worldwide team of like-minded athletes who really want to not only do these big races, but they want to do it in such a way that it's a really fun experience. It's suffering from the sake of we signed up to suffer, but it's not suffering in the sake of we're going to go for the podium and we're going to let you destroy yourself and have injuries afterward. So I think it's just a matter of having people that want to push themselves as hard as they possibly can while not having long-term injuries or breaking those friendships. I think more importantly on this team is coming to the finish line with the high fives and, we're friends forever. That's more important than a podium. So I don't know. I want to race with like 1,000 more people. So nobody should look at it like, why does thisABILITY always race with different people every time? So that's the goal. Like it's fun.
Right. Yeah.
But
what about the rest of it? What are you guys looking forward to? Or
I don't know. So Luis and I were talking maybe Arkansas, maybe Ozarks.
Cool.
And then Worlds. I know like all 4 of us are trying to figure out what the configurations will look like.
So Africa.
Yeah, for Africa next year. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah.
And then who knows what else falls onto the calendar. Haven't dreamed hard enough about that one yet.
I expect to see you guys at Oregon one of these years. We're not doing it in 2023, but be prepared in 24, 25.
Your World's in 24, right?
No, I can't tell you when we're Worlds.
Oh, okay, that's right. It's just a rumor. I heard it.
We are positioning ourselves to be Worlds at some point in the future.
Okay. Congratulations.
Patagonia? Are you guys doing helping put on the Patagonia race? Isn't that supposed to be?
That's up in the air. We don't know if that's actually happening for various reasons. But yeah, but we're putting on 8 smaller races next year, and then we'll do an Expedition Oregon for sure in 24. Whatever it's affiliated with, there will be an Expedition 24. but you know, that's cool because there's a lot of awesome expedition races in the US, and you know, it's really cool to see even just, you know, in Canada and the rest of the world how much that's growing. So you know, I really love your guys' mission, right? And love of the way you race. And I just want to continue to encourage you guys. Like, I think there is a bit of a, I'm trying to think of how to say it. Like, it doesn't have to be, you know, and this goes to like what Chip was saying, it doesn't have to be either way. Like, you can push hard, and you guys are a really amazing race team. Like the fact that you're finishing expeditions, right? And so I didn't realize this until I started winning races. But the reality is, when you are on the podium, the recovery time is 10% of what it is for everybody else. I'm not joking. Like, and so like this idea of continuing to push hard, and like, you guys have what it takes. I've seen you in whatever it was, the Rodriguez Island. Like, you've had some really good races, C2C Rodriguez Island. So just kind of figuring out how to put it together and adapting when it isn't. Like, you guys are all super good athletes. So, you know, I'm glad that you have that idea of like, you know, if you build a team, the joy and the friendship can come. The harder the race is, the harder you push, that intensifies it and it burns it in. So it doesn't have to be this idea of like, we don't want to push so hard that we break people, because if you get the right people, pushing hard is what actually forges the friendships. Does that make sense? And like, you guys are at the cusp of that. And I know you've felt that before. And it's really cool to see such a successful American racing team that has gone all over the world and survived these big races, right? There are very few other teams in the States that are doing that. And I'm just annoyed. It's just seeing all the European flags and stuff like that. It's like, I get all excited. Like,
the Ecuadorian flags are getting up there.
I know. I mean, all the South American flags. I mean, finally got a US one in the, like, you know, but
we beat Argentina.
Yeah, it's awesome, right? And like, kudos to all the race out there, because it's a hard sport. But you know, like, I was personally really excited when I saw your guys' results at C2C, and you know, a couple of the races this year, big expedition races, and even 24-hour races. And so, you know, whatever you're doing to attract people, to mentor them, and to train yourselves, like, just, you know, it's really inspiring, and it's cool to see. And it's a process, you know. Like, how many expedition races have you guys done now? The two of you, Chip and Andrea.
10 or
5.
something. We've done 4 C2Cs, 2 Africas, Ecuador.
Yeah, you've got to be like
Belize.
10 or 12 or 15 almost, right?
Enough. Yeah.
I mean, I know Lewis has done, how many, Lewis? 10 at least?
Oh, I'm in the 20s already.
Yeah.
20.
Yeah. And then Amanda, you've only done a couple, right?
Yeah, I think like 6 maybe.
Yeah. So like, you guys are at that. The cool thing is, like, you know, I guess what I'm suggesting is you all have proven over and over again that you know what it takes to finish the hardest races in the world, right? So now the question that begs is, like, figure out what it takes to, like, be at that. You know, we've all gone through that process, and a lot of teams don't, but you guys have the chops, you have the intelligence, you have the passion to continue moving forward in this sport. And it's super exciting to see, right? And it's really cool every time I see you guys overcome. Like, you know, I trained Lewis for a while, and one of the big things we talk about is, as soon as you drop out of a race, like, you're creating these like neurons in your brain. Like, they've done all these studies on how hard it is to overcome that. As soon as you hit adversity and you decide to drop out, and maybe we'll do better the next race, right? But what you guys have done over and over again, especially following Chip and Andrew, is like, you guys have consistently written the other engrams. It's like, no, we don't drop out. Like, no matter what happens, we don't drop out. We finish, we carry on. And so that is such a solid framework for a top level expedition team. And it's really cool to see. I just haven't seen very, very many other teams do that.
Yeah. And I love that you identifying that it's like the podium doesn't have to be the goal.
Yeah.
Again, we're, you know, 50 somethings, and it's almost the other way around. I look at it like, how many more years am I able to do this?
Yeah.
Right. You don't see many 65-year-olds out there doing this stuff, you know.
Right.
So the idea is that if we've got 10 years, 10, 15 years left of doing these 5, 7-day, 10-day races, whatever, we've got to get them done soon. And so what you're going to see is, hopefully, if all goes well, we're going to be doing 5 a year. Like, this year, right now on the clock, we've got C2C, we've got Croatia, we've got Endless Mountains, we've got Colorado, we've got Expedition Africa, and I'm trying to fit in Ozarks. Meanwhile, we're also going to do a ton of 24-hour races and every other race we can possibly do. So it's really become a lifestyle. it's become like you said, the ability to overcome the adversity, no matter what you come against in day-to-day life.
Yeah.
If you're an adventure racer on the expedition level, it's like, oh, I've seen worse. And barring cancer or any of these crazy things out of your control.
Yeah, Chip is gonna adopt us and take us to all his races and give us.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, Luis and I are trying to quit our jobs and just get adopted by Chip so that we can get the full lifestyle experience.
I do have to say something, you know, about Chip and how I now we know what, you know, he has a new nickname.
What is his new nickname? I want to know.
His new nickname is Pelucón.
Oh, yeah.
Hey, I don't know what that means, so you got to tell me.
So I'll tell everyone. So we long bike leg. We stopped at this place, at this side of the road place that was selling like meat on a stick. Yeah. And funny enough, in one side of the highway, they were speaking Portuguese. Oh, by the way, we didn't know where we were in Paraguay until like day 3, because they never gave you like a lay of, hey, you're going to be in this part of the country. We didn't have a clue. So in one side of the freeway, they were talking Portuguese, and then the other side, they were talking Spanish. So I'm like, hey, you must be like close to Brazil, I'm guessing, right? So this lady was selling these like a little grill with meat on the stick, right? It was pork on a stick and stuff like that. And then, you know, Chip comes and says, I want it all. Give me all your food. And when Jay, we were in the middle of nowhere, right? And we're eating, and this lady, super humble home, sitting down, and then she brings out the food, and she's like, what else does she have? She must have some wine. I'm like, Chip, we're in the middle of nowhere. She brought wine for Chip. Oh, and then she brought her. So he's like, I want it all. I want it all. So from then on, we're like, okay, everywhere that we go, Chip's gonna want it all because everything's so cheap here. So he's like, I want it all. We found a food truck, and he's like, I want all the burgers. Give me all the burgers that you have. Just keep buying everything everywhere.
It's like Monopoly money. Like you can have $1 million. I don't care. It's like $5, you know.
That's it. Yeah. Chelsea brought my kids home like, $100,000. And I was like, what? How does this work? She's like, oh, it's like worth 25 cents. I'm
like a Diet Coke.
Yeah. Awesome.
Yeah. So I'm actually going to write a book that's called The Mid-Pack. Adventuring in the middle of the pack. Because I think the teams that are in the mid to the back have a completely different experience than the front running teams. We got to be, with this lady who actually brought her mattresses out so we can sleep outside her house. Yeah. Then we stopped at this cheese and wine place. The guy brought us platters of cheese with ham, and you're burning time in the race, but it's also part of that experience that I think a lot of the front teams miss out on. And I get it, they have their objective, they got to go hard, they can't stop. But it's, at least for me, that's super fulfilling in these races where we go out in places that you're never going to be in again.
Yeah. And like, it happens in the front too. Like it's a long race. Like we stop to drink coffee. We stop to sleep at people's houses. Like it's, that's the cool thing is with this sport is you are going to find adversity, and you are going to find kindness, and you're going to find like the thought of, or the surprise moments that really touch you. Like whether you're in a rainstorm or, and that is the pretty cool thing is, it is an awesome an awesome sport to go into, because it doesn't matter, the reality is like even the most elite athletes in the sport, we're talking, what did it take Avaya? Like 103 hours? Like that is still too long to care about speed the entire time. Like it's just too long, right? And so you have these moments where all you care about is going into that, probably that same food truck, right? And, walking out of the TA, maybe you don't sit down and eat it, maybe you walk out of the TA but you're still, I imagine Nathan with 3 burgers in his hands, walking, and so it's like, it's pretty cool that just the stories, like you guys have such an incredible story in this race. And I really thank you guys for being open and sharing it. And to me, it's a testament to your relationship skills and your teamwork that you have such a positive outlook on what on paper was a very, a race full of, struggles, right? And so that's a pretty cool thing, just as a parable for life, right? Turning these things to these learning experiences and these growth experiences as a team, and everybody gets to be a hero at times, and that's a pretty cool thing, right?
Right?
Yeah.
You jump in?
Well, I was just going to say, we're starting to run out of time, but I don't want to forget to say congratulations to Bend for their great result in the race. And just Jason, knowing that your team is like our idols, it's like we talk about you guys like, you're just the rock stars of our AR world here in the US. And I'm always impressed by you guys. So I appreciate you taking the time and just, wow.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and I'm equally impressed with you guys, and not only your racing, but your just ambassadors, and how much you love the sport. It's like I have a huge love affair for this sport. It's made a huge difference in my life and my relationships, and it's really cool to see you guys, obviously, very familiar and like a mirror of my own experiences. So that's something I'm very connected to you guys about. So yeah, it's a pleasure. It's always like, it took me most of this whole thing to realize that I met Amanda in Alaska and like raced against her, and you were racing with JD, right?
Yeah, that was actually my first expedition race.
Yeah. Okay. And I remember obviously I've watched that movie to, we have a fun thing in our family, like where we have, we're in enough little movies. And so like whenever Dan pisses me off, I just watch Dan when he couldn't bike, or when he got towed to
Good challenge. Yeah.
Luckily, like I failed just as many times as Dan, but all Dan's get captured on camera. It's great. Right. All mine are like hidden away somewhere. But yeah, it's really cool. So I'm glad to see that you guys are all, had such an awesome, successful, fun experience over there. And yeah, you're all invited to Expedition Oregon whenever it happens again, or anytime. Hopefully we'll see you guys again very, very soon.
Yeah. Let me bring up one more thing. You touched on it, the relationship part, and in addition to the experiences like the cheese and taking the time to watch the sunrise and all that, but I think the relationships are something we haven't touched on enough, especially at the mid-pack, because when I'm watching Nathan and Swedish Armed Forces and they're hiding from each other, and in the mid-pack, like sometimes we help each other, sometimes we go side by side, we get to know each other. But it was really neat. A guy named Fabio from I think it's Sherpa's Trek. Yeah. Like we crossed paths with them a couple times, and at the final party, we're like, "Hey, what's going on?" We spent so much time together on the course, and then at the end, and he's from Paraguay, but he trained to do like cattle management at Texas A&M, so he speaks perfect English. He knows he just like was basically like, "Hey guys, what are you doing tomorrow? I'd love to show you around my city," because he lives in Assumption near it. And so all of a sudden, this guy that we didn't know until this race is taking his time, his car, and unfortunately Lewis had to leave, but Amanda, Andrea, and I were able to ride around with him for like 6 or 8 hours, and he took us to all his little local places, his shop, showed us his house, and told us all about Assumption in Paraguay. And so that's the race is kind of important, but the stuff before and after the race and those relationships that you build worldwide, just expedition adventure racers specifically are such amazing human beings. If you take the time to get to know them, you already have something in common. And then the minute you allow the race to make that flourish, it truly, these are worldwide experiences, once in a lifetime. And I feel like if he ever comes to Virginia, I want to go out of my way to show him the best time ever, because he really welcomed us to his country. So like you said, the adventure race, the relationships are half of the sport right there.
Or more, right? I mean, the whole sport is cool because it doesn't exist without relationships, right? And it's unique in the endurance world, where it's the only endurance sport that I know of that is nothing outside of relationships, right? Both as your team, with the race organizers, with the people in the communities, but it's like, it starts with your team. Like you can't do this by yourself. Like it's just not written into the rules, right? So that's, you've got to deal with relationships, and you've got to embrace them, and it's a pretty phenomenal thing. So okay, so last question I have, which is selfish, is Africa. You guys mentioned you're going to World Championships. Like all of you want to go to World Championships. I want to go there too. Never been to Africa. You guys did it last year, right?
2 years.
2 years. You did
Rodriguez and we did Lesotho.
Rodriguez.
In a nutshell, like, what do I need to think about or prepare for? I've got a while. Like Africa, what kind of, what's the quality of the race over there?
Excellent.
Excellent on another level.
I know it's going to be quality, but like what's the physical quality? Is it biking? Is it off trail? Is it big like Patagonia? Is it more micro nav? Like, what's the
it's going to be big, long sections. It's linear. There's not a lot of road gain. It's clearable. We were really surprised to find out that it's clearable. Like Lesotho, we skipped a point thinking there's no way we're clearing this, and sure enough, we cleared it other than the 1 point. So it wasn't anything like Paraguay where it's unclearable for a mid-pack team. Stefan, like, the funny thing is Heidi is like all about love and makes it all fun and just amazing. And then Stefan's like this, tough guy, and he's going to make you suffer. But if you talk to Stefan behind the scenes, he'll tell you he really puts a lot of thought into each leg. He wants each leg to be different and amazing. He wants to show off the country. There's going to be points that you suffer to get. But I think what people need to hear is it's completely doable by the average adventure racer that's done 3+ day races. It's not. I felt safe the whole time. I felt it was well put together. The logistics are perfect. The party before and after were amazing. The race information coming from the race director was very informative. So you don't come in with a lot of questions and uncertainties. Barring Bend Racing, they're like the top people in the world that put on races. So I would highly suggest you attend.
Yeah, and we're trying to learn from them. So like I appreciate the nod, but like, we put on really hard races, and then we're trying to pull a little bit of Heidi's like love and party atmosphere. So yeah, I'm very excited. So
keep in mind, we have not raced in the location that Worlds is going to be in. So
no, I understand that, but it's more like, you get to know race directors, right? Like, so that becomes a thing. You kind of know what kind of stuff,
I think they make it so that everyone who enters the race feels successful, no matter what their goal is. So it'll be challenging for the top teams, and the back teams will also have a way to finish.
Cool.
Yeah. And it's like 9 days, I think. Like this one was 7 days in Paraguay, which is the longest we've ever raced, which I wanted more. But this one's 9 days open course. And just so you guys know, like most race directors have a cutoff. Stefan doesn't put a cutoff. Like literally in Lesotho, I was like, when's the cutoff? And he said, don't miss the bus, meaning the bus that takes you from Lesotho back to Joburg for the airport. There was no cutoff for the finish line. He said, you can stay out there as long as you want.
No, because they needed you guys on the bus to push it. I saw the cutoff. Honest, like it was self-serving. He was like, there's snow coming in. We need all the races on the bus to push it, so we'll wait for him.
And this will likely be the last race they do in South Africa.
Yeah, I've heard.
Rumor has it. So, and it's the World Championships. This has been their dream. They're gonna blow it out. So this is the race not to miss.
Yeah,
guaranteed.
Okay, well, thank you guys. I've got to go put kids to bed. But it was a pleasure to talk to all of you. Great to see all of you. And again, very impressed, and thanks for inviting me on. So